Good afternoon and welcome to today's AdWeek webinar, where we will be looking at why the future of digital experience is data-driven. And it's some practical information here to help you do things like overcome CX silos and other roadblocks that you may be facing in your move to a more data-driven approach to customer experience. And today's webinar is being sponsored by Acquia. I'm Stuart File, head of AdWeek's Branded Content Studio, and I'm going to be your host for today's webinar. Before we begin, I'm just going to take a few minutes here and make sure that everyone is familiar with the features of our webinar platform and also knows what to expect from our presentation today. Our actual presentation should go somewhere in the 30, maybe 35-minute range. Afterwards, we're going to have plenty of time for audience Q&A. So if at any point during the webinar, if you have a question for our speakers, just simply use the question tool that you see there on the left side of your screen, and we're going to get to as many audience questions as we can following our live presentation. And of course, I do urge you, ask your questions if you can. When they come to you, you do not have to save them for the Q&A time. It's always nice to have a few things set up ahead of the Q&A beginning. It's not too late, by the way, to invite your colleagues to join us today. And you know, back in the days when we all used to go into an office, it was kind of easy. You could just, stop by your colleague's desk, say, hey, come join me in the conference room. Let's go watch this cool webinar. And you just made it all happen with a quick lunch and learn. Now it's a little more complicated, but we're trying to simplify it for you. So when we sent you a final reminder email for our event today, we included a link to the registration page. So you'll find that in the email we sent you about 15 minutes ago. So grab that link, send it off to your colleagues. There's still plenty of time for them to register and join us live, and we would love it if they would. But if they can't make it live, today's webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand. And we're going to send everyone who's registered a link to that on-demand version later this afternoon. So check your email about 3:30 Eastern time. You'll get that. And certainly feel free to share that link with your colleagues, or again, if they're going to enjoy it, have them register. We'll send them that link directly. If you are interested in getting a copy of today's slide deck, you can find it right now in Event Resources. That's the tab at the top of your screen. So grab that, and again, you can get a PDF of the slides and share those with your colleagues too. Finally, please check out the AdWeek webinar calendar, www.adweek.com/webinars with an S. Go there, you'll see everything we've got coming up. We're only doing 2 webinars this week. I say only. Most weeks now we're doing 3, 4, sometimes 5 in a week. Lots of different topics, everything that you're dealing with, and all the challenges that you face today as a marketer in this crazy 2020. So see what we have coming up. Join us, sign up for an upcoming webinar, or access our full archive of on-demand webinars as well. And that includes some from our sponsor today, Acquia. And as you're going to adweek.com, you can also keep an eye out. There's a guest column today from the CMO of Acquia right on our homepage. So if you're interested in all that, again, check all of that out. So let's move on to today's webinar. And let me just take a moment here and introduce our speakers. First up, we're very happy to be joined by Karen Wood, who's the Senior Director of Product Marketing over at Acquia, where she is focused on the Acquia Marketing Cloud. She's got more than a decade of experience taking disruptive digital marketing technologies to market. Excuse me. She previously ran the marketing team over at Agile One. Agile One is what is now Acquia Marketing Cloud, and she's worked closely with enterprise brands as they leverage a CDP to transform their business. And Karen is going to be joined today by Alex Dal Canto. Alex is a Director of Product Marketing at Acquia, where he's responsible for launching and driving the business growth for the Acquia Marketing Cloud. He's been a product marketer at Adobe, which is where he was before this, where he was responsible for launching some customer journey management solutions. So welcome, Karen, and welcome, Alex. And Alex, let me pass this on over to you to begin our webinar today.
Thank you, Stuart, and welcome all. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. It's really a pleasure to be here with you. Today, together, we'll be covering some of the different approaches that we have been seeing in the market, really, to unify data and understand your customers, how some brands can actually plan for their digital transformation, and what they need to actually become agile organizations in today's fast-paced world. And ultimately, we'll go through some real-world examples of brands that have followed this model for digital transformation. So with that, let's jump right in by looking at why this conversation is more than just hype through the market drivers that are impacting businesses around the world today. And really, let's get this elephant out of the room up front. Keep your masks on, because we can't talk about digital marketing strategy in 2020 without acknowledging what many consider to be the biggest change agent for brands this year. The new reality of a global pandemic at the end of the day, right? Which is forcing marketing executives to really rethink their customer engagement strategies and consider new ways to stay competitive or really fall behind their competition. And it's really no surprise that according to McKinsey studies, 70% of executives say that this pandemic alone is likely to accelerate the pace of their digital transformation. I know it's something that we've seen here at Acquia, certainly, and we've also done it ourselves. And it's reshaping their digital strategy roadmaps from years all the way down to small weekly sprints almost, right? And being forced to pivot and adapt to new technology to actually navigate this new era that we're living in. And as an agent of change, the pandemic has actually created a league of winners and laggards of new, right? Brands that are able or have been able to respond quickly and with agility to these changes that have been mandated by the pandemic have quickly propelled themselves to be the leaders in their categories. And in this crisis, they have turned themselves into opportunities to leapfrog their competition. And we have great examples of brands that have done this out in the market, right? If you think about some very well-positioned companies out there that provide services to individuals. But a great example is actually Sean's, who's put this into practice. And if you're unfamiliar with Sean's, it's a long-standing meal delivery service. They've been in business for over 70 years, and as a result, they've collected quite a bit of data across a number of different data feeds, hundreds in fact, and they've actually rolled those up into 500 different individual business reports that help them track and manage and analyze and apply machine learning across the entire customer lifecycle, from acquisition to promotion and retention. And their clients' needs changed and demand soared nearly overnight as people started to lock down due to COVID-19. So Schwann's actually adjusted their engagement strategy, as well as things like their delivery routes and their segmentation approach, to take into account things like coronavirus hot zones to protect their workers and their delivery drivers. And all of this happened, again, overnight, but with zero impact on their IT resources, thanks to the unified data layer that they had deployed. Another trend that we see has actually been impacting brands quite a while before COVID-19, and it's a well-known one. And this is the fact that we have a tremendous amount of customer data that brands need to continuously process and understand, parse out and analyze every single day that they're doing business. Data has proliferated. We have new devices that we're engaging with brands on. Brands are speaking to us and engaging us through new channels. And we as consumers in this instant gratification economy are raising our expectations of brands at every single touch point, right? And if you think about a well-entrenched brand in many of our binds, Lululemon, right, has actually tens of millions of customer records that they've collected from their consumers and are really required to create great experiences, right? And these actual data points are collected through their app, through their stores. They do things like set up, yoga classes inside their stores to attract their customer base, and really hundreds of other systems. And let's just say that it was quite difficult for them to make sense of all of these data points. There were silos involved and redundancies across the board. But so they really understood that they needed to unify their data. And they were able to perform identity resolution when they actually accomplished the unification goal to clean, dedupe, and actually correct their data to gain that crystal clear understanding of who their best customers are, their most highest engaging customers are, and nurture and tailor the customer journey for each individual along the way based on the insights that they've gathered. And I know that we're going to touch on this story in particular a little later on, but I did want to mention that up front as a quick preview. And if the challenges of agility itself and data wrangling weren't enough for marketers, today we have the rise of privacy regulations across the board. Every country, in fact, even some states like California with CCPA, have new, slightly nuanced data privacy regulations that are coming to market. These are stressors for all brands as we try to navigate and honor our customers' privacy requests. But it's not all about avoiding fines at the end of the day. It's about keeping the pace with customers' expectations of our brands and building trust with those consumers, that brands will not use their data against their wishes while also delivering relevant cross-channel experiences. Customers at the end of the day, consumers at the end of the day, have a choice of what data they want to give and to what companies, and we want to make sure that we're able to do that in a trust-forming manner. Finally, it's been proven time and time again that the more engaged consumers are across a variety of different channels, the more likely they are to be loyal customers, the more discretionary dollars they spend with our brands, and ultimately the higher lifetime value that they might have overall throughout the history of their relationship with your brands. And this is why it's important to actually deliver consistent, relevant experiences. I mean, it's a concept that everybody talks about, right? But few are able to actually execute on. If I think back to one of my key favorite companies out there, you know, I got a push notification to an app for a brand that I was very loyal to, and that push notification was for a birthday campaign. I engaged with them across email, I engaged with them over mobile, but I typically would get a free tidbit for my birthday, a tchotchke or a free class. This time around, that wasn't possible because their studios were closed, and so they actually routed me to a Google Sheet, a massive hole in the customer experience for me to then re-upload my information. Now that screams privacy concerns across the board, number one. But number two, they lost me as a loyal customer just because it was not a consistent experience from end to end, and I had to repeat myself to them. Just not a good experience overall. So it begs the question, why do these challenges continue to persist? What do you think, Karen?
Well, Alex, glad you asked. So I think you did a great job just articulating all of the challenges that brands are faced with, especially now in the time of COVID. But as you pointed out right there in the last slide, I mean, it is incredibly hard. And it's incredibly hard because typically because of the way that brands have built their infrastructure. So this experience of, you know, disconnected, inconsistent experiences across channels. I mean, your specific privacy risk experience that you encountered recently, and all of the risks that brands make to keeping their customers happy and loyal with these disjointed experiences come from kind of a root cause that I think everyone can pretty much identify with. And really the reason is the way that we've built our infrastructure, focusing on all of these different systems of data collection and different systems of channel activation and like kind of that last mile of how are you going to communicate with customers. So in this example, it's actually taken from one of our customers, but it's fairly typical of what we see brands struggle with when they talk to us and kind of try to rethink how they're going to build their digital ecosystem around a customer-first approach. So in this case, you know, you can kind of see they've got their POS and inventory systems, CRM data, e-commerce data, all feeding into their data warehouse, which is SAP in this case. And then, you know, in order to send direct mail and send email, they're needing to ask IT or analysts to pull data out of the data warehouse so that they can have these lists and try to, you know, send a more engaging and relevant email to those consumers. But also in this scenario, digital ad campaigns are running in their own silo of just, pulling in identity data from like a DMP or something like that to feed that experience. Their website is personalizing, but it's based on segmentation that's built within the website personalization tool, harnessing data really pretty much that's on the website. And then their call center experience is very isolated to just who's called the call center before and what did they purchase previously. So, these systems, you can see the rich data is there, but it's not accessible to the experiences that the marketing team in this case is trying to drive. And the reason for that is really because many of our ecosystems that we've built, over time have really focused on that last mile. Like, let's get the very best ESP to deliver an email experience. Let's get the very best website personalization tool to deliver a web experience. Let's build a mobile app, deliver a mobile app experience. So it's all about, like, what is that endpoint piece going to be that's going to engage with the consumer? And the tragedy there, if I could be so bold to use that word, is that it's ignoring what's fundamentally going to drive those experiences and make them orchestrated and consistent and relevant and useful for the consumer, which is the data. So we're encouraging brands to think about a data-first approach to their digital strategy. Activation tools are good and they're important, but if you can't unlock the data that lives within all of those different systems and then use them in those systems that are actually reaching the customer, then you're missing a really big opportunity. So again, as we work with brands, we're really encouraging them to think about how can they tap into that data and unlock the potential of their zero-party and first-party data specifically. And so with that in mind, there are a range of choices that are often confusing and conflicting to many marketers who are trying to tap into the data. So one option is a data lake. That's great for bringing all of the data together, but it's not great in terms of, cleansing it, deduping it, reconciling it into a record that can be used, across everything. And then it also has the fundamental challenge of really still being owned and accessed by IT and analysts. So marketers are still kind of stuck with leveraging their own marketing tool and just the segmentation within those tools, or needing to make requests to pull lists out of the data lake. There's an opportunity cost with that model in terms of time. It can take, very often 2 to 3 weeks to get the list, to execute the campaign, and you just miss out on the timeliness and you miss out on the relevance if you pull lists in that way. There's also like lack of analytics and so forth. It's just, again, a good repository, but not necessarily so great about unlocking data and making it accessible. DMP, obviously a really critical tool for digital advertising. It pulls, relies on anonymous cookie pools and anonymous third-party data in order to send, digital ad experiences. So, for example, if you want to send a targeted ad to, somebody in a particular geography of a particular demographic or gender, you can do that, but you don't really know who you're targeting. So it's not really helping marketers solve the problem of unlocking their first-party and zero-party data, and it's not. It's not helping them, achieve that true one-to-one. And in fact, there are now some privacy questions around the approach of overly relying on third-party anonymous data, because if a user has opted out, it's difficult to ensure you're honoring their privacy requests. It also is just focused on digital ads. And then a CRM is another approach. Again, it's good for consolidating data, bringing in data together, but it's kind of limited in terms of the insights you can gain from that, how you can action on it. There's a lack of, support for real-time use cases. Stuart mentioned that I, come from Agile One, which was a customer data platform. And at Agile One, I would say half of the clients that we supported either used a CDP as their CRM, and then the other half still used a CRM, important there, but then fed that into the CDP tool. So again, some might argue a CDP grew out of the CRM space with the need for analytical capabilities as an analytical CRM. So anyway, lots of choices, lots of ways to think about it. I think, for our purposes, we're going to encourage you to kind of think of what would the ideal state look for you, and what are your priorities as a business? As Alex mentioned, we're in these unprecedented times. Business is shaken up. It's not business as usual. Keep your masks on, all very important. But if you think about what you want your ideal state to look like, I'm guessing you probably want your ideal state to reflect your values around increasing profitability and revenue and marketing ROI. I mean, that's at the end of the day a marketer's job. But there's a growing need to increase engagement, loyalty, keep those the customers that you have, you want to keep them. So it's a lot more about retention, increasing loyalty, maximizing the value of your first-party data, as opposed to, spending a whole bunch of money on acquiring new customers. It's really, most brands we talk to are hunkering down and trying to keep their loyalists in place during these different times that we're experiencing in 2020. Also, some priorities are increasing efficiencies. I mean, giving teams direct access to data, I would say, is a theme we hear over and over again as we talk to enterprises. They want to empower and enable their teams with data that everyone can trust and everyone can rely on in the same way. And then, of course, undergirding all of this is the need for agility, which I think brands have known is important for quite some time, but never has it seemed more important than right now when, retailers are having to deal with store closures, or airlines are having to try to keep their frequent flyers in place, even though nobody's flying right now. So having the agility to adjust your business, and especially as certain locations are reopening, how do you think about that? And do you have your infrastructure in place so that you can be successful as things evolve and change? And again, I'll just kind of underline what I spoke about earlier. We really think that harnessing your data and unlocking your data is going to be the fundamental thing that can make you successful and make you stand out from the competition in the minds of your consumers. And the way that we encourage brands to think about it is all about a customer data platform. So I know we're going to talk a little bit about our solution. We're not trying to make this a sales pitch or anything like that, but we want to at least put it in the framework of how we think about it. And the way that Acquia thinks about it is building on top of a CDP. So again, step one, get your data all in one place. Make sure you can trust it. And then once you have that, then all of these other things are possible. So within our CDP, we do a lot of identity resolution, there's analytics. It's all about really the intelligence and the accessibility of the data that can be used for a number of different use cases. So with that, we're going to talk about some of the key themes that we see, and I'll pass it over to Alex to dig into that.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. So let's take a look at what we think at Acquia the ideal state actually looks like, what those key tenets are, right? So the first and most fundamental tenet is that any marketing platform must be open. And this means that they must be open to integrating with any data source, whether it's online systems, offline systems, or homegrown systems. It means that it must be open to unique configurations that any of your businesses have, right, in terms of requirements, custom attributes, or syntaxes without engaging in massive service efforts. It means that the platform must be able to be leveraged by any team within your organization to surface the right insights across your entire business, whether that be marketing, to reps that you might have in your stores when they reopen, to service teams and call centers and IT as well. And also, it must support the business across any domain, any brand that you might have, any geography that you operate in, and properties and more. And this alone provides brands with a ton of advantages over their competitors, such as increasing the agility of your business by future-proofing your business to onboard new technologies quickly as your needs change, flexibility to accommodate, again, any type of data source, as well as the requirements of your business or volumes that you might need as you scale, and ultimately also the accessibility of that unified, cleansed, deduped, and enriched data that all teams are able to access from one reliable master record that is trusted by your teams, to allow any part of the organization to do their jobs and make the customer experience as great as it can possibly be. If we look to one of ACQUIA'S examples here, Ashley Stewart is a clothing retailer with a very, very loyal customer following. And it's really a great example of embracing openness of technology. Ashley Stewart unified their data within ACQUIA'S CDP to actually apply key insights that can be leveraged for action across their business through other systems. They're power users of Salesforce Marketing Cloud, actually, including their store associates leveraging this data, email and direct mail marketers leveraging this data through things like Salesforce's Email Studio, and even business analysts that track and analyze their business. And going through open, open here really is, you know, when you think about it in terms of unique business requirements, right, we talked about on the last slide a little bit, I wanted to give you some kind of key examples of the types of unique specifications that some of our customers have configured directly into the platform, right? And by configuring these details into the Marketing Cloud, these customers have become able to access any insights across their entire interaction pipeline, including for things like analytics, personalizing their websites, mapping and building out customer journeys to then execute, and ultimately engaging their customers also through third-party solutions that they might depend on for their businesses. All right, so that's open. That's the first one. Karen, you want to walk us through the second tenant?
Yes, so I kind of touched on data first earlier in the presentation, just in terms of philosophically needing to have all your data correct and reconciled and in one place that you can use. So this is just reinforcing that. We do have, you know, this is Godiva that you see here on the slide is one example of such a customer that is harnessing our data to drive their experiences. They have a great use case around Facebook advertising and the way that they've targeted and segmented lists to drive better campaign ROI, leveraging the data from their own customer base, both for hyper-targeting and then also for lookalike modeling to understand, you know, I want to attract and find customers that look like this. And saw a pretty significant return in the return on ad spend there. But the bottom line is having your data in one place where it's proven and everybody trusts it. It's unified, so it's bringing online, offline, you know, any data from your own custom tools, homegrown, you know, transactional profile, event data, all of that data unified together. And then, you know, making it understandable and accessible and then actionable so that you can actually use it and harness the power of your data. We actually did get a question. I know we're not at questions yet technically, but the question was, what are some example technologies that you integrate with? So, and I was like, oh, we actually have a slide to show that. These are just some of the integrations that our system has in terms of who we integrate with, both from a data ingestion point of view and then also through a data output point of view, so that we, you know, again, can ingest data and of course send that data to external tools as well. So these are just some examples of systems that are live with our customers. And then another core tenant is machine learning. Pass it to you.
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, it's one thing to be data driven, but it's another to be to actually gain insights from your data and become data science driven, right? And so, you know, within the platform here, machine learning insights are accessible and easy to use across all the same teams that can access that master customer record, right? Enabling smarter decisions along the way and more agile decision making as well. So not every team, not every company has their own data scientists, but if they do, they can actually feed their own models into the system, or they can actually share ACQUIA'S unified kind of cleansed data layer with their external BI tools for things like their own analysis, which creates alignment across the business around this unified data set. And also, it's easy for any marketer to use the out-of-the-box models that we have here, right? So you have things like predictions that surface data, that surface insights, I should say, as soon as data is flowing through the system. And if you don't have that in-house data science expertise or BI resources, anyone can access those insights, which are actually calculated at the profile level, so that we can then surface them through any system, whether it's natively through Acquia or any third party, right? So the idea here is to provide flexibility as well as accessibility to these machine learning insights that are often hard to use. And if we look to Moosejaw, which is a Walmart company, they're power users of machine learning. Their marketing team actually developed several different personas, and the machine learning models that they've tailored align to these personas and predict what each of the personas actually discount sensitivity will be. And so using machine learning, they're able to drive their discounting strategy that they then activate through things like email campaigns. And they've seen quite a boost in conversion thanks to this practice. But our actual kind of approach to machine learning here gives teams options, right? It gives teams without those data science expertise immediate ways that they can actually use these insights for analysis and campaigns across three categories. One side, you have predictions, so things like the likelihood of a person to perform a specific action. And again, these are all calculated at the individual level. The second one is personas, right? So, like that Moosejaw example. So clusters of customers with a specific propensity for a product or a category or a seasonal propensity, if you will. And then finally, kind of personalization, which includes elements like what is the next best product or the next best action or next best channel to engage a person in that makes them most likely to engage with your brand, as well as things like optimizing the time. You know, what is the best time for us to deliver an email to that specific person? And of course, again, you have those custom models if you do have those expertise, those data science expertise, to feed the models directly into the system so that all of the machine learning can be harnessed natively across your entire stack. But it's not enough to just provide models and clusters and that's the end of it, right? There's a robust framework that's required for any organization to make the most of their machine learning practices, right? You need to be able to configure the models that come out of the box to meet your unique business requirements. You need to be able to leverage the data mix and the types of data for those models that is relevant to your business. There is really no one-size-fits-all approach, right? Every business is as unique as the customers that we sell to. And you need to be able to create different tailored variations of those models by brand or by region or by any other dimension that is mission critical to your initiatives. With the insights that actually scale horizontally with your needs as your business grows and expands to be consumed again by really any team within your organization that is making decisions for your customers and orchestrating the customer experience.
And then to cover off on another key thing to think about, and I've brought this up before, the trusted data that all teams can use. So how do you make your data trusted? So I'm going to go to the next slide and give a couple of examples. So one thing that as we talk to brands, a lot of them ask us about is the best way to do identity resolution. There are lots of different tools on the market, different ways to do it. The questions that we get are, where should this reside? At what point in the data ingestion process into a unified data layer should identity resolution take place? So we do have some thoughts around that, but I think you can't underscore enough the importance of identity resolution. For example, if you look at the left-hand side, you see 6 isolated incidents of someone made a credit card purchase, someone did a mobile guest checkout, they made a purchase and they signed up for the loyalty program, they called the call center, etc. Ordinarily, without identity resolution, regardless of how you do it, this is going to be seen as 6 different people, which means that your analytics of how do you evaluate your best customers is going to be inaccurate. It means if you take data from across your different systems and execute that for a personalized campaign, that personalization is going to be a little incorrect because you don't have the clear, accurate view of who your customers are. Compare that with the right-hand side of this slide, which is bringing that together, stitching that together into one unified view for analytics, insights, and for activation. Obviously, we have a CDP. Our CDP includes identity resolution. I mean, we could talk at length about why it's preferable to have identity resolution within the CDP. But regardless of where it is and how you go about doing it, I think we can all agree it's incredibly important in terms of the accuracy of your data. For customers, of Acquia who use our CDP, they typically have 30 to 50% of their database size change. I mean, that's how many duplicates brands typically have. And so again, identity resolution is going to build trust in the data, build trust across the organizations. We have our process has a multi-step process. Again, if you want to learn more about that, happy to talk about it. But again, it's just incredibly important if you want to actually activate your data.
Exactly. And of course, you need governments to actually comply to the data privacy requirements that we talked to up front, but also in terms of scalability and administration across your environments across the globe. So you need a multi-tenant infrastructure that supports multiple brands, business units, however your organization is set up. But then you also need the flexibility to centrally or even locally manage those multiple environments, supporting whatever scale you need for your business. And this provides great efficiency through centralized management of your digital properties, where you can actually manage your business globally and easily do things like replicate environments, workflows, websites to serve your distributed business while saving time and creating efficiencies across the way. So with that, what do customer experiences actually look like when you bring this kind of ideal state into the fold? Right? You have the data from your different systems being unified through a single layer, which ACQUIA'S analytics, machine learning, solutions like Campaign Studio and personalization, and again, any tool within your stack can harness engagement across every interaction with your customers, which actually enables you to meet your customers where they are at every stage across the customer lifecycle, from awareness through to acquisition, all the way to loyalty, growth, and advocacy ultimately. So, Karen, I know we have the lifecycle here that you're going to run us through very quickly. Would you like to give us an overview?
Yeah, just, we get a lot of questions from folks and marketers who are just asking, how do you use it? Like, what are the most common ways people use a marketing cloud? Or once you have your data all in one place, like, what are the most common types of use cases? So we really categorize them in kind of three key ways. Acquisition, I kind of mentioned this earlier. Obviously, that was the example I talked earlier with Godiva. The key thing with acquisition is, lookalike modeling. You can do, very useful suppression. So if someone purchases something through a different channel, you don't want to follow them around the internet with targeted ads if they already bought it. So just like, again, you're reducing your ad spend by not targeting people who already bought something. And then, of course, the hyper-targeting you can do by uploading custom lists to your display vendors. And then engaging customers. So, this part of the life cycle is important, and less talked about, I think, than others, but absolutely critical. And this is delivering that one-to-one, very personalized experience through channels such as the call center, or, if you happen to be in person, socially distanced, but you want to treat that person with a very deliberate one-to-one experience through a clienteling app. That's another example, or even just website personalization. So really being able to deliver an experience that consumers expect to grow that account. And speaking of growing accounts, if you're doing outbound marketing campaigns such as direct mail, email, SMS, of course, having that unified data that you can action off of to deliver highly relevant experiences through those outbound campaigns, and even like discount strategy if you're in the commerce business, and other very specific strategies of how you want to grow that business, you can do that because you have your data all together, cleansed and deduped and reconciled together. So with this, there are other benefits too, such as increased operational efficiencies. Wix is an example of this. I think I mentioned earlier, when you're rely on other teams that don't have access to the data yourself, it can take weeks to get access to the data. Wix, in their example, they gave direct access to their call center agents to be able to pull up a customer record, and saw huge efficiency gains in closing, calls on the call center, and also just the satisfaction rating went up. And then also just any campaign, email, direct mail, what have you, the marketers just were able to pull those lists, and it was accurate and clean, and then they were on their merry way to executing campaigns. So it went from like 3 weeks to 20 minutes or something like that. So those are the common use cases to your question, Alex.
Thank you, Karen. So we've gone through a ton. Let's recap very quickly. Here you see how Acquia Marketing Cloud actually fits into Acquia's digital experience platform. Our real-time APIs ingest data into the customer profile that's managed by that CDP layer that then feeds all the marketing services that Acquia provides natively, as well as your entire marketing stack through any third-party solutions that your business might need and depend on. And Acquia has been doing this for quite some time now. We've been helping enterprises perfect customer experiences for the last 15 years through this customer data platform foundation that provides this flexible and scalable architecture servicing billions of customer profiles, interactions, and events per day for our 4,000 customers globally. So I know we have a couple of customer examples here, Karen. Maybe just touch on those briefly.
Yeah, in the interest of time, I won't go into too much detail, but Lululemon is a power user of our tool. Back to the use cases I spoke about earlier, they started by focusing on unifying their online and offline data together to drive better outbound marketing campaigns. Now they have hundreds of users across their organization that all use the platform for Eventbrite, yoga workshops signups, now digital yoga signups, digital advertising, across the board. They're using data to power all of their consumer experiences, and their profits have been quite remarkable. And then Moosejaw, I think Alex spoke to this earlier. Really harnessing machine learning capabilities to do advanced targeting and discount strategy for different segments that map to their personas. And I'm not going to go detailed on that. If you guys are curious, we would be happy to walk you through it some other time. But before we close up and I hand it back to you, Stuart, I just want to point out, we recently launched what we're calling a COVID analysis dashboard. So to the point that Alex mentioned earlier about our unprecedented times and brands, really pivoting to a digital-first approach, our dashboards give, for any data that's feeding into the tool, you can get analysis into how, if your retailer store closures have impacted your business, how well you're doing with channel migration strategy, and really get the insights that you need to make intelligent decisions about navigating opening and closing and reopening and just, all the craziness of 2020. So we'd love to give you a demo of that if you're interested. And then also I just want to give a quick plug for Acquia Engage, which is in October. It's going to be a really exciting, bringing together of marketers from some of the brands that we've talked about here and other companies talking about their digital strategy and what they're doing to improve experiences for their consumers. So we'd love for you to join us for that. And with that, I'll kick it back to you, Stuart, to help manage the Q&A.
Great. Well, thank you, Karen, and thank you, Alex, for sharing all those details. A lot to digest. And so, again, I'm sure we're going to have plenty of questions here. I do want to invite our audience. We're going to get into some audience Q&A. So if you do have a question for our speakers, just simply use the question tool that you see there on the left side of your screen. I've got a few of them queued up now. We want to get to as many as we can over the next 10 minutes or so. Please ask your question. If we don't have time to get to your question, I will make sure it gets forwarded over to our sponsor today. So there's the opportunity for someone to respond to you offline. Some quick reminders here for everyone. First off, we had a few people asking. If you do want a copy of today's slides, you can find them right now in Event Resources, which that's a tab that you see up there at the top of your screen. So you can go in and download a PDF of the slide deck and refer back to that or share it with your colleagues. Also, today's webinar has been recorded and will be available on demand. We're going to send you a link to that on-demand version about 3:30 Eastern time today. So again, feel free to share that link with your colleagues, or if you think someone who wants to hear this, have them come on over, register now. We'll send them that link directly once everything goes live. So let's take a look at some of these questions that are coming in. And Alex, let's just sort of just start off with you here. We looked at a lot of use cases. We went through a bunch of things. A lot of them, obviously, actually all of them have a very clear retail focus. Can you talk a little bit here about use cases that you're seeing for this kind of execution for someone who might not necessarily be involved in that retail or e-commerce space?
Yeah, absolutely, Stuart. So, when you look at a customer data platform kind of as a foundational tool, it applies to any industry, right? And so we've seen clients across a variety of industries, from government to healthcare providers, some nonprofits, all the way to your more traditional kind of industries that you think about here, like travel and hospitality, media and entertainment, so on and so forth, right? But when you look at the kind of golden record that we're able to create within the customer data platform, that data unifies anyone's engagement with your brand and is able to be surfaced as your company needs fit. So if you think of a streaming company, right, like a Netflix or a Hulu, right, being able to know not just every customer based on the profile that they've signed up for, or the fact that they've come to the website and maybe browsed but didn't sign up, is one data point that lives within the customer profile. But then you're able to actually have all of that interaction history with that subscriber or prospect to then do things like recommend new shows, understand what their interests are to actually surface new content, make decisions about what original content to produce. So that's one side. Looking to travel and hospitality, for example, right? Right now, Karen mentioned that things are all about retention and loyalty within that base. And generally speaking, the industry at large has been a loyalty driven industry, right? If you think about loyalty programs, most of us, the first thing that we think of is, oh, my Miles and More subscription or my medallion status, right? And so there as well, right, where there's a lot of dynamic price competition to gain business and also to retain your loyal customer base, in particular in kind of high volume routes, pre-COVID, of course. Knowing those things about your customer, knowing what they've researched, when they've researched, their buying patterns, their likeliness to purchase a full price fare versus a discounted economy rate, are critical elements that are consolidated within the customer data platform, and then you can act on through the activation solutions like Campaign Studio or Acquia Personalization or any other third-party tool to surface the right information to that person through the right channel at the right time. So just a couple quick examples, but again, this could really be used for any industry. In fact, every industry is doing pieces of this at least today.
Got it. Thank you. Karen, one of the things, again, let's sort of look at this as sort of putting in place a CDP as you go through this. And, one of the slides early on, was showing, the data lake and, all the different parts that seem to be owned by different parts of the organization. So with a customer data platform, really what functional areas within the organization should really, sort of own or manage that? Is this a marketing execution? Is this an IT execution? Is this a cross-departmental execution? How would you view that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I would say that companies are most successful when they are aligned cross-departmentally, and specifically across marketing and IT, but even more so across marketing, IT, any regional areas or regional shops, or in the case of retail, stores, customer experience professionals, really the range of teams that will need to action off of a single data set. And when you think about it, it's actually, the merchandising, it really can cross a whole range of teams. And so the most successful businesses that we work with are aligned really from the top down, from the CEO level, who see bringing data together into one place in order to gain insight and intelligence from it, and then action off of that intelligence. If that initiative is top down, then the whole company benefits, and you kind of can't go wrong. The success and ROI from a solution like that are very measurable and provable to the C-suite, to the board. And again, it's the more teams that have access and can leverage that, the better. And another thing I'll say is, I know when CDPs first came on the scene in 2016, I think is when that phrase was officially coined. it was deemed a marketing tool. In fact, I think the first Gartner report on it called it the customer data platform for marketers. But what we're seeing now is that it is other teams that are vested parties in a CDP, both acquiring one and also utilizing one on a daily basis. So I would argue it's really becoming a lot more of a business-wide tool and less of a marketing-specific tool. Obviously, the use cases will, feed a lot of bread and butter marketing use cases, but the whole business will be able to access it and leverage and get value from it.
So, Karen, one of the things that sort of struck me as you were talking this through, and certainly we've gotten some questions on that, is when you talked a little bit. And I think it was you. I'm trying to remember who brought up each point. About when layering a CDP on and starting to look at the data and running your dedupe and finding that you had like 40% duplicate records as you're looking for identity, and that sort of raises the question about sort of tactics for doing identity resolution, right? I mean, it's first off lets you be more efficient, lets you reach somebody once. Lets you really know who somebody is. But what ultimately, as you start to look at this, should brands be thinking about this today? There's sort of the two sides, which is what are you doing to ultimately own more of the first-party data, because that's increasingly important as all this goes on. And then once you have that first-party data, what are you doing now, and how should you approach really making sure that what you have is not only accurate, but of the moment as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's a multi-step process. So I would say two things that are important to consider. One is, we provide it as part of the CDP. There are other ways to do identity resolution, as I mentioned. I also think it's important to make sure that any identity resolution you choose isn't just hard-coded in a one-and-done way, that it has the flexibility to bring in all of the different data that would be important in order to resolve that identity, not just limited amounts of data. And also that it's comprehensive and following rules that are important to your business. So the flexibility is really important. In terms of tactics, again, range of different ways to do it. I think I would just look for the comprehensiveness of the solution in terms of what it is capable of doing. So should be able to standardize the data, like do name parsing, validate the phone and address, so make sure it's correct. There aren't missing characters and stuff like that. And then the cleansing and deduping and so forth. It should be able to link and do backstitching. So if an anonymous visitor has been coming to your website and then identifies themselves, you should be able to go and backstitch that to previous activity so that you have a well-rounded picture of that visitor once they're identified. And then, of course, having that persistent ID that you can harness. That's so it needs to live somewhere in the cloud that can be accessed. And then also, as I said, being able to ingest and integrate data from all sorts of different systems, including data, third-party data append providers, bringing in such as weather data, data from like Axiom or Data Logics, Facebook profile data to the degree that you can access it, and things like that.
Got it. We have a few more questions, Karen and Alex. Unfortunately, it looks like we are fast approaching the end of our time here. So I will, again, just let our audience know if you did ask a question and we did not have a chance to get to it, I will make sure it gets forwarded over to our sponsors. So there is the opportunity for a possible offline response. So again, Alex and Karen, I want to thank you both for both the presentation and taking your time to answer some audience questions here. Just some final reminders to our audience. Again, if you want the slides, you'll find them right now. Event resources, top of the screen. Check your email about 3:30 Eastern Time today. We're going to send you that link to the on-demand recording. And lastly, adweek.com/webinars with an S. adweek.com/webinars. That's our webinar calendar. And that's where you'll find out about all the webinars we have coming up and also get access to our full archive of on-demand webinars. So please check that out. Sign up for an upcoming webinar if you like. So again, I want to thank our speakers. I want to thank our audience for taking time out of your busy day. And we look forward to seeing everyone at an upcoming Ad Week webinar.